The Three Rivers is a very interesting location in the world of myth. It is also a big part of the starter set for Myth Tales of Legend, and we've been discussing that. So this is actually a continuation of that. Hi, I'm Ross Watson, lead designer for Myth Tales of Legend.
And I'm J.M. DeFogie, and I'm the lead writer for Myth Tales of Legend.
Hey, you guys, we're so pleased to be back talking to you today. Again, we've had a lot of people talk to us about how Myth is doing, and people are really liking the quick start that's out there, the Lost Barrow. You find it on a drive-through. We talked about quite a bit of our game earlier this month, or late last month, I think. Well, it's like right at the end of last month for the Ulysses Online Con. But today we're gonna dive back into the Riverlands. There's just a few areas we haven't discussed because, and this is important to talk about. Is we did a whole show on the Riverlands, and then we did a whole show on the starter set, diving into it, and we're still not quite done with it.
Yeah.
So there's a lot going on with the world of myth. It's very deep. There's a lot of detail in it. A lot of that detail we came up with ourselves, and I think it's just important to point out that if you want to know more about the Riverland, of course, you're going to find that in the Game Master's Guide for Myth Tales of Legend. But the starter set dives a little deeper into just that particular area because we wanted to make sure the DMs had all the resources they need to be able to run those starter set adventures, which JM is also writing.
Yeah, we're gonna run the Lost Barrow here on Thursday. I think the same day that this episode goes live, you can tune into the Ulysses International stream and watch us do the.
Yeah, very likely. Yeah, probably the same day. And you're gonna be writing the adventures that are in the starter set. So JM's got a lot of involvement here, just to be really clear. And last time we left off, we were talking about the Unnamed Alley, which is really, really cool, but we missed out on one little piece of that particular area, which is the Sprawl. Tell us a little bit about the Sprawl, and then tell us about the Parlor.
Well, so I like the Parlor a lot. The Sprawl, how do I want to put this? So the Sprawl is it's the oldest part of the Three Rivers. It used to be called, Dawn Rest. It had all of these great epic names when it was when Three Rivers was being rebuilt at the end of the Age of Legends, at the start of the Age of Heroes. But as the city grew, much as these things do, you have the old part of the city that sort of it wasn't necessarily as well planned. It sort of is growing haphazardly. And so you have this area called the Sprawl. It is sort of your, like the old district of Three Rivers. There's like cathedrals there. If West Shore is growing, the Sprawl is sort of contained, and now the only way to kind of build is to build up or to build in. And so it's a network of like mazes of alleys and streets that maybe don't go anywhere anymore. Like they used to be thoroughfares, and someone just built a building like right in the middle of this place. And so nestled in there, we have a lot of things that basically it is the perfect place for a wandering hero in the world of myth to find anything that they need, right? And inns, entertainment merchants, people who want to pay for work. There is a small cathedral to the Morning Lord there, but we have this place called the Parlor.
Well, hang on a second. So what you're describing actually makes me think of like fantasy London.
Yes.
In a lot of ways, like a fantasy Victorian era almost London with crowded streets and tall buildings and everything's kind of hemmed in, but it's very prosperous and very bustling.
Mm-hmm. I may have to share.
Unlike Blackwall. Blackwall's got alleys and warrens and shit too, but it is not nearly as prosperous as this.
Right, exactly. I may have to share the map that I sketched out that I was drawing. Right? It's easy. It's much easier for me to say, all right, here's kind of the Three Rivers, and here's like the different areas, so that I could say, okay, here's kind of how I envisioned it in my head. But Fantasy London is a great way to look at that. So we wanted.
Well, it is divided. It's also divided by rivers too, kind of like London.
Yeah, exactly, like London. You got the Three Rivers, and then kind of the Mater that kind of comes out of it. So we have, right, the Temple to the Morning Lord. In Three Rivers, there's a Bright Legion sort of embassy. And so I really wanted to have the Bibliosophes here. And so my thought was, well, how would the Bibliosophes be in this sort of cosmopolitan city and yet stay sort of under the radar? And so there is this place called the Parlor. It's the home of the Bibliosophes. And every month during the full moon, they sort of have these kind of salon gatherings where they invite the rich, the powerful, the intellectuals, maybe the artists sometimes, maybe poets. And they are very subtly putting information out into the Three Rivers, into kind of talking with the people who can influence a larger community. And it's sort of their vault here in Three Rivers. So they maintain the library, the books, the scrolls, the artifacts, the whole thing.
It reminds me of, if this is Fantasy London, this is basically, we're talking about the Hellfire Club.
Yeah, the Hellfire Club. Maybe the Inklings, depending on how you view the Bibliosophes, are they good or they
right? See, but they're like this, it's kind of like a gentleman's kind of club. There's probably, guys with monocles and seated in stuffed chairs.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Brandy and cigars, that kind of stuff.
Yeah. For
me,
but
it's interesting. It's interesting that they hold their thing during the full moon.
Yeah. There's
so that immediately makes my mind say, oh, well, I'm sure that the Lucanine are involved somewhere in this.
The Lucanine, maybe it's because that's when the defenses, maybe there's wards or magic that's most powerful during the full moon. So that's why, because they were able to stay under the Bright, the Bright Legion is always looking for the Bibliosophes. And so as far as of now, they're sort of under the radar. They're able to do this thing, and the Bright Legion hasn't really picked up on what's going on. But there's a lot of change happening in Three Rivers. And that's sort of one of the things to remember, right? Cities in our world, they're usually the most cosmopolitan, the cutting edge of change, whether it's intellectual, social, cultural change, because there's so many people there. There's so many ideas that are sort of revolving through the city that the Bibliosophes are kind of able to infiltrate and kind of keep scattering these seeds into the wind to see what takes root and grow. Now,
I like to.
Oh
no, I mean you're not wrong. This is great. I love it. But my mind likes to leap from thing to thing and be like, oh, this would be a great place to meet Limina, who is our shape-shifting Lucanine. Right? You're nodding your head like you get exactly what I'm saying.
Yeah, no, this is the perfect because Limina is sort of this she is a Lucanine. Did we talk
about her way in depth? No, we're going to talk about her way more in depth later on.
Okay,
because she's a major figure in the starter set and in the Lucanine and in the Three Rivers. She's actually really important to all of these things. But the short version is she's a shapeshifter Lucanine she's got her fingers in a lot of pies, and it just seemed natural to me that if a place is only open on the full moon, like a shapeshifter who's also Lucanine would be like, hey, I'm there.
Yeah,
because also you get to meet the rich and powerful of the area. It's perfect.
Yeah, no, it makes perfect sense to me. And you've got this idea that you may want to get invited to these parties. Maybe you don't know what's going on, but you've heard it's where the high society meets.
Were you just taking notes just then about...
Maybe just a little. I definitely... Did you see the light flash on my face as I jumped over from one set of notes to another?
I love these conversations because we
riff
on each other's stuff and we're like, oh wow, what about this? So the Parlor is really cool. It is a Bibliosoph location. It's basically the Hellfire Club, but we don't have a lot more information on that. But you were going to say what's important about it is.
Oh, so to me, what's important about it is it's this right there are changes in the Three Rivers. So when we talked about the lions last week, right? Not all of these changes are necessarily good. There's revolutions that are starting to revolutionary concepts that are starting to take root, and the more conservative side of the Three Rivers is going to start taking notice, and they may be able to trace it back to the Parlor. Every time you say Hellfire Club, I'm like, why do I feel like those would be bad guys? Oh, right, X-Men.
Yeah, right.
That's right. That's right where my brain goes. Is
there's the historical Hellfire Club, and then there's the Marvel Comics Hellfire Club,
which is way worse, I think.
Well,
I have not studied the historical Hellfire Club, but I do know that they were bad guys in Chris Claremont's run.
So, are we done with the parlor? Do we want to move on?
I think that kind of covers. So, we're going to go into kind of the other locations in the Three Rivers, right?
Well, there's the newest district, which is called West Shore, and I almost forgot about it when I was looking over the notes. I was like, oh right, West Shore, because it literally is the newest. It's the newest development. It's like buildings are still going up. You probably got craftsmen and carpenters and stuff. I mean, probably everybody. I imagine the large majority of our fans have seen housing developments go.
Oh yeah,
right, and it happens all the time. Like there's a place near my friend's house where they're just putting out new buildings after new buildings, and you get to kind of know what that looks like and how that affects things. So this is the expanding area of the Three Rivers, but it's also the most vulnerable, which I think is interesting because there's no wall.
There's no wall yet, and in fact, the one thing that they do have that's kind of better than anywhere else is they've laid out these boardwalks. So they have, the dwarf who's sort of in charge of building up West Shore, Herschel. One, it's easier for him to get around because he's in a wheelchair. But the other reason is that he has a vision for West Shore, and if he's able to pull it together, it may be the cutting edge, if you will, of like new cities in the Four Kingdoms. And so he has this plan, and he's going to stick to it as best as he's able. But yeah, it's it's kind of where now, the merchants would gather and then go away, and then gather and go away. And so now there's starting to be enough merchants that are sticking around between trade seasons that the city is springing up, or this new district of the city is springing up.
Yeah, it reminds me of like Santa Monica, like a lot of piers and a lot of like boardwalks. And so you mentioned Herschel is in a wheelchair, which is interesting because his wheelchair was made in Blackwall, it says here. And that, to me, indicates that is very likely got some Tinkerer upgrades.
Oh yeah, I like when we get into doing art for the starter guide, and Herschel's been like I want to get in like a piece of art of Herschel and just tell the art guy, hey, listen, this is a like a Tinkerer level, like clockwork sort of.
Yeah, little pipes and devices and buttons.
Yeah.
He's probably Herschel's one of those guys that you don't want to mess with. He may be in a wheelchair, but he is a very powerful man. He has a lot of influence over West Shore. He's building it to his design. He's kind of a genius, but at the same time, that chair is definitely more than just a conveyance.
Yeah, I kind of like the idea of maybe the front of it having sort of this like iron riveted, I don't want to say like a ram, but kind of that sloped, so when he's pushing through the crowd, people almost like a cattle catcher on the front of a train. Get out of the way. Yeah. That's pretty good. Now he represents the Merchants Guilds, and I mean, how high up? Like if 10 is the top of the Merchants Guild and 1 is the guy who just joined, where's Herschel on that? So I think Herschel in his own mind is an 11, but probably at least for now, right for now, it's a lot of speculation. Like buildings are going up, protection rackets are starting, loans are being handed out, so there's not a lot of return on investment yet. So he's probably a 6 or a 7. Like he's up and coming, but the Merchants Guild really is up in River Falls, and so they're like, sure, okay, this could be a good investment, but we're ready to cut Herschel loose if it all goes south. Like this is not going to go back upstream and hit the guild unless it succeeds.
Right. Now the boardwalks you say here are very crowded. Basically, this is we talked about the rest of the city being bustling and having prosperity. This is even more bustle. This is the crowded Santa Monica Pier level area. And this is one of the reasons why West Shore is kind of dangerous, because I love your description here. It says, if the Lucanine attack, West Shore will fall like fatted lambs. And I'm like, yeah, West Shore is that. It is the weak point in the city's defenses. Mm-hmm. It is probably. I mean, how do I put this? They're vulnerable because there's lots of people there, and not a lot of those people are really ready to fight. Those are like people who want to sell things, people want to buy things, people who live there, people who want to buy a home there. Mm-hmm. It's normal folk, it's normal citizens, and they're just going about their everyday business. But there is no wall, and they're right next to the edge of the city, right. And the Lucanine are not far away.
And I mean, I'm going to add this in here and give myself a note. The other thing that we should probably point out is the fact that the city guard, at this point, the council is not entirely sold that this thing is do we want to invest resources into building a wall? Do we want to send people out to kind of patrol the area? So right now the guards kind of watch over Westfall from the walls, and that's why Herschel is like, all right, yeah, West Shore. Herschel's like, well, I've got protection. Don't worry. If you need it, you come to me. It's just one more service I provide. Politics.
It's it's politics, and the city's like, if we guard it, then we basically own it, and that means we have to protect it. Yeah, all those things are factors. Now, what's interesting to me also is you have this area at the center called the Market of Many Colors. Tell us about the Market of Many Colors. This is cool.
Well, thanks. I appreciate it. So basically, it's the market kind of in the center of many of our cities in our world come up because they're at natural crossroads, or there's natural resources, right? Rivers are kind of a big deal. So I liked the idea of saying, hey, for the longest time, West Shore was just where the cattle from throughout the Four Kingdoms kind of were brought here to be slaughtered in Three Rivers slaughterhouses and then sent out into the Four Kingdoms. And so the merchant shops that kind of stayed became the foundation of West Shore. But during the cattle trades, there had to be a way to get information to people who wandered in. You have these huge herds spread out over the shore. How do you figure out what's going on? And so there were these flags that they would raise. So you would raise different color flags for different things that you were doing. And that has become this complex, almost merchant's cant. So if you walk into the colors market, you can go, there's this, there are all of these flags, and depending on what you're looking for, you can follow the different colors. If you're interested in goods from Blackwall, they've got this gray flag that they fly. If there's somebody's running a sale, they may add a green flag to the pole outside of their merchant's tent. And so there's no need for hawkers, there's no need for callers or belters, because it's actually,
can't you see the flag?
Can't you see what's on sale? What do you mean? What do I sell? Don't you understand? And so there's this kind of almost elitist, I don't want to say secret society, but there's this cant that you'd have to kind of start understanding and embracing. And I have notes on that. I may if we want to write that up some point and put it if there's room in the starter box, I'll put in what the different colors mean.
Yeah, that would be really cool. I think that'd be awesome. Actually, I was thinking. So during the Age of Sail, ships would be able to send messages by what they called semaphore, which was raising and lowering different flags.
Yep.
That may not be a thing yet, but it would not surprise me if there was someone in the market who was thinking, man, I wonder if there's a way to have these flags spell out a whole message.
Yeah.
That would be really neat.
And I think we should totally say, and then there's some in there who use the flags for more nefarious purposes.
Oh, of course, yes. So, one thing about this that strikes me as really interesting is that this is a perfect place, not only just to buy and sell things, but to actually have a really neat encounter. To me, this is the first place I would want to have my guys run into the tribunal. I would love to have them. Oh, you're shopping, cool. Yeah, you stop by. What are you looking at? Just have a 15-minute, little role play session, not necessarily role playing shopping, but at least role playing through the market. And then one of the flags shifts aside and you see this guy in silver armor, and they'll be like, oh shit, what's going on? It could change the whole thing. And it would be really neat to do it in a public space like this. It'd be a lot of fun.
I think it would be funny to, if I were running in Three Rivers, to just, go to like some sort of fabric store and get a little dowel base and then make little felt flags, and then when people just come to the table, I'll have the day's colors raised, and not even tell them what's going on, and to see who picks up on the fact that the flags are.
Yeah. A little arts and crafts can go a long way.
Oh yeah,
that would be really neat. That's cool. You know what? I'm gonna have to make a note here too and see if I can, because there's possibilities with that.
Mm-hmm.
There's possibilities with that. So that's going to lead us to the end of this particular part of the city. But there are other parts of the city that we did not discuss either, which is the Riversides, the Runoff, and the Three Sisters. Why don't you pick one of those, and let's jump into that.
Well, let's go to the Runoff.
I like it.
It's sort of the right. It's the Southern District in quotes. This is the part of the city, right? So the Three Rivers come in, and then the main river kind of heads out of it. So the Runoff is kind of where everything that the city doesn't want to necessarily deal with. Muckstone Prison is there, where people have nowhere else to go. They just sort of like, there's almost this shanty town on the southern end of the city.
Slaughterhouses, tanneries.
Yeah.
This is also, it's the bad part of town.
Yeah. And then we have this great NPC, a Spriggan named Shroomlim, who is kind of the patron saint of the unwanted.
I love this guy.
Yeah.
I love this guy.
He's like part counselor, part judge, jury, and executioner. Like, if you go into the Runoff, like, Three Rivers law is sort of interpreted in its most brutal. Like, we realize that no one wants to acknowledge that we're here, and we don't want to give the city any reason to kind of come in and cleanse the Runoff. So we're going to take care of our own. You step out of line.
Yeah.
But I do like Shroomlim. I think he's going to be a great NPC.
I can't wait to see this guy with all the mushrooms on him and everything. It's going to be cool. And actually, I bet he's got a really interesting story. Like, how did you end up here of all places, right? Yeah. That's got to be an interesting story. The Three Sisters. Sorry. So the Three Rivers is the area. The Three Sisters are the bridges that you use to cross the Three Rivers. So I imagine each sister has their own name, but that is not necessarily listed here. But they're cool because they're from the Age of Legend. They're spun out. They look like they're spun out of silver. They're wide. They resist ice. They're sure-footing for everybody. And according to legend, no creature of darkness can cross them. We mentioned this in our discussion on the Three Rivers in general, and we talked about like how that could either be true or just a legend. But either way, there's like some really interesting story elements you could use off of that.
Right, and the fact that if it's true, it's just crossing the bridges, and there are multiple rivers in Three Rivers. So it doesn't necessarily mean no creatures of darkness can come in. But we leave that into the hands of the GM. Like,
it could be very interesting for someone like Limina, for example. Like if we're like, well, maybe she's corrupted by the darkness. I know, we'll take her over the bridge. The bridges cannot be harmed or altered by swords, sorcery, or alchemy, which is important. Those are basically indestructible. And the council's built gatehouses around the ends because that's pretty much you have to control these bridges.
Yeah. And because they can't be destroyed, if someone takes the bridge, you've sort of lost the district on the other side. So they've kind of fortified either ends of these bridges.
Well, it's going to make it harder, that's for sure.
Yeah. And then the last place is
the Riversides.
The Riversides. And it's like an interior district that kind of works, like it connects. It's almost like the the interstitial space between the other districts, but basically it's the docks that inhabit the sides of the river. It's where most of the trade is coming through. You're going to find most of the warehouses, the shipping, the merchant guild houses are going to be along the rivers. Now, there is one of these revolutionary ideas coming out of the parlor, is this idea that, hey, there are all these guilds that are sort of showing up, and right now, like, the merchants have sort of a stranglehold on the warehouses. Maybe there should be a dockers guild. And as you may imagine, the warehouse owners come down pretty heavily on that. But it's only a matter of time before something breaks, if that makes sense.
Well, the other thing that occurs to me is this is also, I'm sure there's quite a few aristocrats who own boats or ships, pleasure vessels, if you will, to go up and down in. I mean, it's one thing to be seen on the streets. It's another thing to have your own little boat and a party on it in the middle of the river where everyone can see you and be seen by you. I imagine that would also be kind of a thing, is that there's probably some fairly large wealth disparities on the river, on the riversides. You've got, the dockers are all sitting dock workers are all sitting on a pier eating their lunch out of a paper bag, and then they see, pleasure barge go by.
Yeah, and I tried, that's one of the things, when you look at cities historically, cities are usually the places where there's the biggest wealth differences between the rich and the poor. When you get out into the country, everything sort of kind of normalizes a little bit. You'll have slight variations, the manor lord versus the guy working his farm, but still it's not the same as somebody who is a wealthy aristocrat in a city and somebody who lives in the runoff. Those are Council Island and runoff are almost completely different worlds.
Okay.
Yeah.
So let's say you're GMing a game set in the Three Rivers, and your characters, they all they go down to the runoff, they get in some trouble, and they end up in front of Shroom Limb. My question to you is what, as a GM, what is your backstory for Shroom Limb? Why is he there in your mind?
So in my mind, ooh, interesting. All right, let me ponder this real quick. I would say, just off the top of my head, the reason that Shroom Limb is there is that Three Rivers is this very fertile and kind of verdant area. It's why people keep coming back to the Riverlands. It's why they keep rebuilding it. And so Shroom Limb, long ago, during the Age of Legends, he had a little grove here, and that was destroyed during the Siege of Farronrock and the coming of the darkness. And so he has kind of grown more gnarled and more bitter and less flexible, both physically, if you will, and mentally. And so he's I'm not leaving. This is my spot, and his spot just happens to be the runoff. And so he's he's just embraced, right? He's just embraced all of that and kind of has become this kind of bitter, gnarled, gruff, wise Spriggan who doesn't take, he's heroes. I've seen thousands of them come through here. What makes you different? And maybe the heroes can kind of pull some of those calluses off and get him to actually start caring about things again, as opposed to just, this is where I've planted myself. The rest of you can do what I want because this is my home.
Oh, I like that. Actually, I really like that. I had an idea, but yours is way better. I love the idea that you have now that he's not a crime lord. I was going down the gangster route. But he is bitter and just he's intractable, right? And the idea that he could have his mind changed, but it would be very, very difficult is important. Now, one place I did go with my idea is that Spriggans are creatures of magic. They're very unusual beings. And I would imagine that anything growing off of them would be the same. So in my head, I was these shrooms probably have to have some really interesting properties. And the way I was going with mine, the crime lord is he's got these little mind control shrooms.
Oh, that'd be awesome.
But no, actually, in your version's way better, because I was thinking, okay, so now you can have almost like a maybe the whole reason to seek him out isn't just to change his mind, but because his shrooms have particular Vision Quest like properties, like you see
because he's
really weird stuff, when you take them.
Oh, I like that too. Like, all right.
Yeah, like there's a lot of possibilities here for this dude. That's really neat. And those could all be, we could even put those into the book as like rumors and whispers rather than word of God type stuff. Just to kind of give Game Master a little flexibility. If they want to take him down the Al Capone way, they could go that way. But others say, no, he's just here because he's bitter. Okay, sure.
Yeah, I think
but maybe there are some of the counselors like, no, that dude's a crime lord. Maybe you could leave it up to either way.
Put the rumors in there. Yeah, one of the things I really love, like one of my favorite role playing settings is Glorantha, and the idea that they like baked in that your Glorantha will vary. Like, I love leaving some of these things where it's like, all right, GM, this is just like a giant hook. Hang whatever you want off of it. And I feel like Shroomlim has that potential. I mean, we just came up with like 2 or 3 good ideas for it.
Exactly. So that's just one of the reasons why I thought it was really cool to go through this section for the Campfire chats and tell people about, like, hey, this is some of our thought processes and how interesting and unusual the world of myth actually is. When you pick up that starter set, you're going to get not just pre-generated characters, not just some adventures, not just a cool intro to the world. You're also going to get like a deeper look at parts of the world than we are doing in some of our other books,
which is sort of our intent, right? We wanted to make sure that there was something of value for everyone in the starter box.
Exactly. And we're gonna go back to the Dimwold here in a bit, and also we're going to discuss the Packlands and Limina, who's awesome. That'll be coming up in the future. Check out our next episode when we get into that, you guys. In the meantime, you can check out JM, the GM, doing his thing, which is now the Four Horsemen of Torg, which is fantastic. I'm in it. We're having a ball. JM is also running some other stuff. I'm going to let him tell you all about that. Go ahead, sir.
Well, we had a great Torg session this last week. You can go check it out. There was a fight on a C-130 with exploding water bottle crates and techno demons. I just wrapped up last night from the day we were recording this, the Annals of Antioch. We reached the conclusion of the Annals of Antioch, and it was a spectacular ending for the Fading Suns arc. So if you haven't checked that out, I highly recommend going to do that. But now, going on Thursday, for the next 2 to 3 weeks, we're going to be doing the Lost Barrow, and I'm going to run it. Ross is going to play in it. We're going to get some of the people from both games on Tuesdays and Thursdays together, and we're gonna show you guys the Lost Barrow kind of as a live play.
I'm actually really excited to see how that works out, because it's a very fun adventure, I think. And you and I worked pretty hard on it. So that's going to take us to the end here. So until next time, fans,
keep telling stories.